High Counselor Vexhai received Earth's response while sitting in his private chambers aboard the massive Council flagship. The translation came through clearly, and for a moment he thought there had been an error in the communication system. Surely these primitive humans could not be rejecting the Council's generous offer. Vexhai's reptilian features showed what his species considered amusement. His scaled lips curved upward in what humans might mistake for a smile, but which was actually an expression of predatory satisfaction. In his long life, he had overseen the conquest of 47 worlds. The pattern was always the same: show overwhelming force, make reasonable demands, accept surrender, integrate the new species into the Council's structure. It was efficient, clean and profitable. War Master Thokran, report to my chambers immediately, Vexhai commanded through the ship's communication system. The War Master arrived within minutes, his silicon-based form gleaming under the chamber's lights. Thokran was the Council's most experienced military commander, a being who had personally led the subjugation campaigns on dozens of worlds. His crystalline structure hummed with energy as he spoke. The humans have rejected our terms, High Counselor, Thokran reported. Their response was unusually brief and aggressive. Indeed, Vexhai replied, standing and walking to the large viewport that showed Earth hanging in space below. It seems these humans require a demonstration of our capabilities before they understand their situation. Deploy the standard subjugation fleet. 200 vessels should be more than sufficient. Thokran's form brightened slightly, indicating agreement. The fleet will be ready within 6 hours. Based on our analysis of human technology, resistance should be minimal. Their most advanced weapons appear to be chemical rockets and basic energy systems, 4th-generation plasma weapons at most. Excellent. And prepare Ambassador Kriltan for post-battle negotiations. Once the humans see our power, they will be much more reasonable about accepting our protection. Ambassador Kriltan was already preparing the standard mercy terms that the Council typically offered after a brief show of force. These terms were actually more generous than the original ultimatum, designed to make the conquered species feel grateful for the Council's kindness after experiencing their military might. The Council fleet began moving into attack formation, their ships spreading out in the classic pattern that had proven effective on every previous world. The lead vessels were heavy assault cruisers, designed to overwhelm any defensive systems with pure firepower. Behind them came the troop transports, ready to land occupation forces once the planet's defenses were neutralized. Our sensors show minimal space-based defenses, reported the fleet's intelligence officer. A few orbital stations, some communication satellites, and what appears to be construction debris scattered throughout the solar system. War Master Thokran nodded with satisfaction. This would be even easier than expected. Human space technology was clearly more primitive than their intelligence had suggested. The scattered debris indicated that they had probably been building defensive platforms, but hadn't finished them before the ultimatum expired. As the Council fleet approached Earth's solar system, Captain Kim Tae sat quietly in the command center of what the aliens thought was a simple communication satellite. Around him, his crew prepared for the battle they had been training for their entire careers. The satellite was actually one of 50 advanced combat platforms disguised as space debris and civilian infrastructure. Enemy fleet entering sensor range, reported his tactical officer. 200 vessels, standard Council formation. They're following pattern 7 exactly as predicted. Kim nodded calmly. For 40 years, human intelligence had been studying Council military tactics through carefully hidden observation posts throughout the galaxy. Every battle, every conquest, every strategic decision had been recorded and analyzed. The Council's greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. They never changed their methods. Are all platforms ready? Kim asked. All 50 combat platforms are online and ready. The heavy defense stations are powered up and waiting for your signal. Admiral Lee reports that all fleet elements are in position. Kim looked at the tactical display showing the approaching alien fleet. 200 ships was indeed an impressive force, capable of devastating any normal planetary defense. But Earth's defenses were far from normal. They had been designed specifically to counter Council technology and tactics. Begin Phase 1, Kim ordered. Let them get closer. The Council fleet continued its approach, completely unaware that they were flying into a carefully prepared trap. Their sensors showed exactly what the humans wanted them to see. A primitive world with minimal defenses and no real military presence in space. War Master. Thokran felt confident as his ships moved into final attack position. "Begin the demonstration," he ordered. "Target their orbital installations first. We want to show them our power without causing unnecessary damage to the planet's surface." The lead council ships opened fire, sending streams of plasma toward what they thought were Earth's primary defensive positions. The energy beams struck their targets and created impressive explosions that could be seen from the planet's surface. "Excellent," Thokran said, watching the destruction. "Their defenses are even weaker than anticipated. Prepare to broadcast surrender terms." But then something unexpected happened. The explosions that the council ships thought they had caused were not from destroyed human installations. They were from carefully placed charges designed to create the illusion of successful attacks. And as the fake explosions faded, the real battle began. "Now," Kim whispered. 50 hidden combat platforms suddenly came online, their stealth systems deactivating to reveal weapons that should not have existed. Engineer Choi Dayun's revolutionary plasma rail hybrid cannons opened fire simultaneously, sending streams of energy that cut through council shields like they were made of paper. The aliens' first indication that something was wrong came when their lead assault cruiser simply exploded. There was no warning, no time to raise additional shields or take evasive action. One moment the ship was advancing toward Earth, and the next it was an expanding cloud of debris. "What was that?" Thokran demanded, his crystalline form flickering with alarm. "Report." "Unknown weapons fire. Multiple sources. Our shields are not stopping the energy beams," the tactical officer replied, panic creeping into his translated voice. More council ships began exploding as the hidden human platforms revealed themselves. These were not the primitive weapons the aliens had expected. The energy signatures were unlike anything in council databases, and the targeting accuracy was impossibly precise. Captain Kim watched with grim satisfaction as the first phase of the battle unfolded exactly as planned. The council fleet was in complete disarray, their tight formation now working against them as exploding ships damaged nearby vessels. "All platforms, continue firing. Focus on the command ships first," Kim ordered. On the council flagship, High Counselor Vexhai watched in growing horror as his supposedly superior fleet was systematically destroyed by weapons that should not exist. The humans were not defending themselves with desperate last stands or heroic sacrifices. They were methodically hunting his ships like predators. "How is this possible?" Vexhai demanded. "Our intelligence showed they had no fourth-generation weapons. The energy readings are off the scale," the science officer reported. "These weapons appear to be fifth-generation technology, possibly even sixth generation. The power output exceeds anything in our databases." War Master Thokran made the difficult decision that no council commander had been forced to make in over 300 years. "All ships retreat to minimum safe distance. We need to regroup and analyze these weapons." The surviving council ships fled back toward the edge of the solar system, leaving behind the wreckage of 60 vessels. What should have been a routine demonstration of power had become a devastating defeat. The humans had not only resisted the council's attack, they had destroyed nearly a third of the fleet without losing a single defensive platform. As the alien ships retreated, Dr. Park Hana monitored their communications from her position in the orbital command center. The translations were fascinating, revealing the aliens' complete shock and confusion. "They keep asking how we have such advanced weapons," Park reported to Admiral Lee. "They're trying to understand how we developed technology that their intelligence said was impossible for us to possess." Lee's cold smile returned. The first phase of humanity's response was complete, and it had exceeded even his optimistic projections. The Council now knew they were not dealing with a primitive species, but they still had no idea what they were really facing. The aliens thought this was just about advanced weapons. They were about to learn it was much more than that. Admiral Lee Jun stood in the command center of the orbital defense station, staring at the holographic display that showed Earth floating peacefully below. The blue marble looked so calm from up here, but Lee knew that in less than 70 hours, everything could change forever. 6 months ago, humanity had celebrated what they thought was the greatest moment in their history, first contact with alien life. The Galactic Council had arrived with their massive ships, speaking of peace and unity among the stars. The world's leaders had been excited, thinking this was the beginning of a new age for humanity. Lee had been suspicious from the start. Dr. Park Hana walked into the command center, carrying a data pad filled with her latest analysis. Her face was grim, and Lee could see the worry in her eyes. She had been studying the aliens since they arrived, learning their languages, watching their behavior, and trying to understand their true intentions. "The translation is complete," Park said, setting the data pad on the central table. "I've gone through every communication they've sent us, every diplomatic meeting, every casual conversation our people recorded. Lee, they've been lying to us from day one." Lee picked up the data pad and scrolled through the information. The cold feeling in his stomach grew stronger as he read. The Galactic Council wasn't here to welcome humanity into some peaceful alliance. They were here to control Earth before humans became too dangerous. "Look at this section." Park pointed to a specific part of the translation. "This is from a private communication between their ambassadors. They call us the aggressive expansion species and refer to our technology as rapidly advancing beyond control parameters. They're afraid of us." Lee, Captain Kim Tae entered the command center, fresh from a meeting with the other military commanders. His expression was as serious as the others. "The Council ships have moved into position around our solar system," he reported. "They're trying to make it look like a peaceful formation, but it's clearly a blockade. No ship gets in or out without their permission." Lee nodded grimly. The pieces were all falling into place exactly as he had feared they would. The Council had studied humanity for who knows how long, watching from the shadows, learning about human nature and human capabilities. They had seen how quickly humans developed technology, how aggressively they explored space, how they fought wars and conquered challenges, and the aliens were terrified. "What's our current status?" Lee asked Kim. "All defense stations are online and ready. The fleet is positioned as discussed. General Yoon has confirmed that all ground-based systems are operational." Kim paused, then added quietly, "The secret projects are also ready for deployment." Park looked between the two men. Even after months of working together, she still didn't know all the details of what Lee and the other commanders had been preparing. She knew it was big, and she knew it had been in development for much longer than 6 months, but the full scope was still hidden from her. Lee walked over to the main communication console and activated the recording system. In a few hours, he would need to send Earth's official response to the Council's ultimatum. The aliens had given humanity 72 hours to surrender completely. They wanted humans to give up all weapons, all military assets, all space-based technology. They wanted Earth's governments to step down and accept Council rule. They wanted humanity to agree to be relocated to preservation worlds where they could be properly managed. The message was clear: submit or be destroyed. "Sir," a young officer called from his station. "We're receiving another transmission from the Council flagship." "Put it on screen," Lee ordered. The main display changed to show Ambassador Kriltan, the insect-like alien who had been the Council's primary negotiator. His compound eyes glittered as he spoke in his translated voice. "People of Earth," Kriltan began, "you have 58 hours remaining to comply with the Council's generous offer. We understand this is a difficult decision, but it is the only path forward that ensures your species' survival. The galaxy is vast and dangerous. There are threats you cannot imagine. Under Council protection, humanity will be safe and secure." The transmission continued with more diplomatic language, but Lee could read between the lines. The aliens were getting nervous. They had expected humanity to surrender immediately when faced with their superior technology and numbers. The fact that Earth was taking time to consider the ultimatum was making them uncomfortable. Engineer Choi Da-eun arrived just as the transmission ended. She looked tired but excited, the way she always did when working on something challenging. "The modifications are complete," she announced. "All systems are operating within normal parameters. The Council's sensors won't detect anything unusual until it's too late." Lee smiled for the first time in days. Choi was a genius when it came to weapons and defense systems. She had been working around the clock to prepare Earth's response to the Council's threat. Her innovations were going to be crucial in the coming battle. "How long have you known?" Park asked suddenly. "How long have you known this was coming?" Lee turned to look at her. Dr. Park was brilliant, and she deserved an honest answer. "We've been preparing for this possibility for over 40 years, he said quietly. "Ever since we first detected signs of alien technology in deep space. We knew that first contact would eventually happen, and we knew it might not be friendly. Park's eyes widened. 40 years? But it means that every space program, every military development, every technological advance since the 1980s has been part of a coordinated preparation for this moment. Lee confirmed. We've been getting ready for war while the world thought we were just exploring space. The command center fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't just stumbled into this conflict. They had been planning for it, preparing for it, building toward it for decades. The Council thought they were dealing with a primitive species that had barely reached their own solar system. They had no idea what was really waiting for them. 60 hours, Kim said, checking his chronometer. Do we send the response now? Lee walked back to the communication console and activated the recording system. He thought about all the work that had gone into this moment, all the preparation, all the sacrifice. He thought about the billions of people on Earth who were counting on him and his team to protect them. Then he smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was cold and sharp like the edge of a blade. This is Admiral Lee Jun speaking for Earth and all humanity, he began, his voice calm and steady. We have received your ultimatum, and we have considered your terms. Our response is simple. He paused, letting the silence stretch for a moment before delivering humanity's answer. Come and take it. The transmission ended, and Lee turned to face his team. The die was cast. In less than 60 hours, the galaxy would learn what humanity was really capable of. The Council had made their biggest mistake by threatening Earth. They were about to discover that humans were not prey. They were predators. The Council's emergency session was unlike anything in their 1,000-year history. Representatives from 12 different species gathered in the massive meeting chamber aboard their primary command vessel, all struggling to understand how their routine conquest had gone so wrong. High Counselor Vexhai stood before the assembled delegates, his reptilian features showing none of the confidence he had displayed just days earlier. The holographic display behind him showed the devastating losses their fleet had suffered. 60 ships destroyed, hundreds of crew members dead, and their reputation for invincibility shattered. We underestimated them, admitted War Master Thokran. His crystalline form dimmed with what his species considered shame. Their weapons technology is far beyond what our intelligence indicated. These humans possess capabilities that should have taken them centuries to develop. Ambassador Kriltan's compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights as he spoke. Perhaps we should reconsider our approach. If they have such advanced technology, maybe they would be valuable allies rather than subjects. But Vexhai's response was swift and angry. Allies? These humans rejected our generous offer and destroyed our ships. They have made themselves enemies of the Council. We will not negotiate with them as equals. What the Council didn't know was that every word of their emergency session was being recorded and translated by human intelligence operatives who had been monitoring their communications for decades. Dr. Park Hana sat in her laboratory deep within Earth's orbital command center, listening to the aliens debate their next move while she worked on her own analysis. The truth about humanity's preparation was far more complex than even the Council's worst fears. Park had access to classified files that revealed the real scope of Earth's long-term planning. What she had learned would have terrified the aliens even more than their military defeat. Admiral Lee Jun entered the laboratory, followed by Captain Kim Tae and Engineer Choi Da-yoon. The four of them represented the core leadership of humanity's defense against the Council, but they also shared a secret that most of Earth's population didn't know. How much should we tell them? Park asked, looking up from her translations of the Council's communications. Everything, Lee replied. They need to understand what we're really dealing with. Lee activated a secure holographic display that showed a timeline stretching back over 40 years. In 1962, our deep space monitoring stations detected the first signs of alien technology, he began. Radio transmissions, energy signatures, evidence of faster-than-light travel. We knew we weren't alone, and we knew that contact was inevitable. Kim studied the timeline with interest. Even he hadn't known all the details of how early the preparations had begun. That's when the secret program started? Every major space program since then has been part of the preparation, Choi confirmed. The civilian space agencies were real, but they were also cover for military development. Every satellite we launched, every space station we built, Every mission to other planets was gathering intelligence and testing technology for this moment. Park manipulated the display to show a web of connections spanning the globe. The cooperation between nations was unprecedented. Countries that were publicly enemies were secretly sharing technology and resources. The entire Cold War was partly a cover for preparing to defend Earth. The scope of the deception was staggering. While the world thought they were watching competition between superpowers, human governments had actually been working together to develop weapons and defenses capable of fighting an interstellar war. The space race wasn't just about reaching the moon. It was about establishing the foundation for a planetary defense network. The Council made a critical error, Lee explained. They assumed that because we appeared primitive, we actually were primitive. They never considered that we might be hiding our true capabilities. On the main display, Lee showed satellite footage of Council ships moving through the outer solar system. The aliens were regrouping, bringing in reinforcements and preparing for a larger assault. But they were also doing something else that revealed their fundamental misunderstanding of their situation. They're following standard siege protocols, Kim observed, setting up a blockade, cutting off supply lines, preparing for a sustained campaign. They think this is still a normal conquest. Choi's expression was grim as she accessed her weapons systems data. They have no idea that we've been watching them conduct sieges on other worlds for 20 years. We know exactly how they operate, and we've designed countermeasures for every tactic they use. Park translated another intercepted communication from the Council fleet. They're requesting detailed intelligence reports on human capabilities. They want to know how we developed such advanced weapons so quickly. The Council's science advisors are baffled. Lee's cold smile returned. The aliens were asking the wrong questions. They were focused on how humanity had developed advanced technology, when they should have been asking why humanity had developed it. The answer to that question would have revealed the true scope of what they were facing. Begin Phase 2, Lee ordered. Captain Kim Tae's ships had been waiting in the asteroid belt for this moment. Unlike the defensive platforms that had destroyed the first Council attack, these vessels were designed for offense. They were smaller, faster, and equipped with stealth technology that made them nearly invisible to Council sensors. The ships weren't just hidden from the aliens. They were hidden from most of Earth's population as well. For 40 years, humanity had been building a secret fleet designed specifically to fight the Council's forces. These weren't exploration vessels or research ships. They were weapons of war, and they had been waiting in the darkness of space for decades. All strike teams initiate hunting pattern Alpha, Kim commanded from his flagship. Primary targets are their communication relays and supply vessels. Make them understand that we're not trapped in this solar system with them. The human ships moved through space like ghosts, using technology that the Council couldn't detect or counter. Engineer Choi Da-yoon's stealth systems were based on principles that the aliens had never encountered, making the human vessels effectively invisible until they chose to attack. The first target was a Council communication relay positioned at the edge of the solar system. The massive structure was designed to coordinate fleet movements and maintain contact with Council headquarters. It was heavily defended and considered completely secure. The human attack ships approached from 3 different directions, their stealth fields hiding them until they were close enough to strike. When they opened fire, the relay station was destroyed in seconds, its wreckage spinning away into deep space. War Master Thakran received the report with growing alarm. How did they get ships outside our perimeter? Our sensors showed no movement from Earth. Unknown, War Master. The attack ships appeared without warning and disappeared immediately after the strike. We cannot track their movement or predict their position. On Earth, Dr. Park continued monitoring Council communications while Admiral Lee coordinated the expanding offensive. The aliens were beginning to realize that this wasn't a defensive action by a cornered species. The humans were actively hunting them. They're starting to panic, Park reported. Their communications are becoming more frantic. They're requesting emergency reinforcements from the Council homeworlds. Lee nodded with satisfaction. Good, let them call for help. The more ships they bring, the more we can destroy. Captain Kim's strike teams moved through the outer solar system like predators, targeting Council supply ships, communication nodes, and isolated patrol vessels. Each attack was swift and brutal, leaving no survivors to report what they had seen. The Council fleet was being systematically blinded and weakened, but the most disturbing part for the aliens wasn't just the attacks themselves. It was the precision and coordination that revealed a level of planning that should have been impossible. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were implementing a strategy that had clearly been developed over many years. High Counselor Vex High received the latest casualty reports with growing dread. In just 48 hours, the Council had lost over 100 ships to human attacks. Their communication network was in ruins, their supply lines were cut, and their fleet was scattered across the solar system in defensive positions. How long have they been preparing for this? Vex High asked his advisors. This level of coordination doesn't happen overnight. The question that terrified the Council leadership was one they couldn't answer. If the humans had been planning for this conflict for years, what else had they prepared? What other capabilities were they hiding? And most importantly, how had humanity managed to fool the Council's intelligence services for so long? Ambassador Krilton made a suggestion that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. Perhaps we should consider withdrawal, cut our losses and report back to the Council that this species is too dangerous to conquer. But Vex High rejected the idea immediately. We cannot retreat. Our reputation depends on completing this conquest. The other subject species must not see the Council as weak. The aliens didn't understand that they had already lost. They were still thinking in terms of conquering Earth, when the real battle was about something much larger. The Council's desperate call for reinforcements reached their homeworlds after traveling through the galaxy for several days. What arrived back was not the immediate support they had hoped for, but rather a stream of increasingly panicked communications from Council-controlled worlds across the galaxy. High Counselor Vex High read the reports with growing horror. The human attacks had not been limited to their solar system. While the Council fleet was being systematically destroyed around Earth, human forces had simultaneously struck at targets throughout Council space. Supply depots, communication networks, and military installations had been hit across dozens of star systems. This is impossible, Vex High said, his reptilian features showing fear for the first time in centuries. How do they have ships in our territory? We've been monitoring Earth for decades. They never left their solar system. War Master Thokran's crystalline form was dim with defeat as he delivered the latest intelligence reports. Our analysts believe the humans have been infiltrating our space for many years. The attacks show detailed knowledge of our installations, security protocols, and defensive capabilities. This level of intelligence could only come from long-term observation. Dr. Park Hana sat in her laboratory on Earth, coordinating with resistance movements that most of the galaxy didn't know existed. For 20 years, human agents had been making contact with species enslaved by the Council, providing them with technology, training, and hope. When the war began, these hidden allies had risen up simultaneously across the galaxy. The Keth Rebellion has secured 3 star systems, Park reported to Admiral Lee. The Maul Underground has destroyed the Council's primary manufacturing facility in their sector, and the ex-freedom fighters have cut the main supply route between the Council homeworlds and their outer territories. Lee studied the galactic map that showed the spreading chaos. Red markers indicated worlds in open rebellion, yellow showed systems under attack, and green marked areas where human agents were coordinating resistance activities. The Council's 1,000-year empire was collapsing in a matter of days. How many species are we working with? Lee asked. 37 confirmed, with more joining every hour. It turns out that most of the Council's subject species have been waiting for an opportunity like this. They just needed someone to show them that the Council could be beaten. Captain Kim Tae's voice came through the communication system from his position in deep space. Admiral, we've located the Council's primary command vessel. They're trying to retreat to their home territory, but we have them trapped in the Vega system. Excellent. Begin the final phase. Engineer Choi Da-yoon had been working around the clock to prepare humanity's ultimate weapon. Not a superweapon in the traditional sense, but something far more devastating to a technologically dependent civilization like the Council. Her virus had been designed over 15 years, based on detailed analysis of Council computer systems and communication networks. The virus is ready for deployment, Choi reported. Once it enters their network, it will spread to every Council ship and installation. Their technology will be permanently disabled. The virus was more than just a computer program. It was a piece of adaptive code that could rewrite itself to counter any defensive measures the Council might have. It would spread through their quantum communication networks at faster than light speeds, reaching every corner of their empire within hours. But before deploying the virus, Admiral Lee wanted to give the Council one final chance to surrender, not because he felt mercy for them, but because he wanted them to understand exactly what was happening to their empire. "Open a communication channel to the Council flagship," Lee ordered. High Counselor Vexhi's image appeared on the main screen, his reptilian features showing exhaustion and defeat. Behind him, the bridge of his ship was in chaos as reports of disaster poured in from across the galaxy. "Admiral Lee," Vexhi said, his voice barely controlled, "we wish to discuss terms for a ceasefire." Lee's expression remained cold and emotionless. "There will be no ceasefire. You threatened humanity with extinction. Now you face the consequences of that choice. We were offering you protection. The galaxy is dangerous, full of species that would destroy you without hesitation. The Council maintains order and peace." "Your peace is built on slavery," Lee replied. "Your order requires the subjugation of every species you encounter. That ends now." Vexhi's desperation was clear as he tried one final negotiation. "What do you want from us? Territory? Resources? We can negotiate a settlement that benefits both our species." Lee's smile was colder than the vacuum of space. "We want you to experience what you've put every other species through. Surrender all your military assets. Submit to human governance. Accept relocation to designated preservation worlds where you can be properly managed." The words were exactly the same as the Council's original ultimatum to Earth, and Vexhi recognized them immediately. The human was throwing the Council's own terms back at them, demonstrating that the roles had completely reversed. "You cannot be serious," Vexhi said, his voice shaking with rage and disbelief. "You had your chance for peace," Lee replied. "You chose war instead. Now face the consequences." The communication ended, and Lee turned to Engineer Choi. "Deploy the virus." Choi activated the deployment system she had been preparing for years. The virus spread through the Council's communication network like wildfire, reaching every ship, every station, every installation in their empire within minutes. The effect was immediate and devastating. Council ships throughout the galaxy simply stopped working. Their engines shut down, their weapons powered off, their life support systems switched to emergency backup. The aliens found themselves helpless, floating in dead ships that no longer responded to their commands. On the Council flagship, Vexhi watched in horror as every system on his ship began shutting down. Emergency lights flickered on as the main power grid failed. The bridge computers went dark, leaving the crew in near darkness. "What have they done to us?" Vexhi demanded, but his officers had no answers. Their technology had simply stopped working, as if some invisible force had reached into every piece of equipment simultaneously. Dr. Park monitored the virus's progress from her laboratory, watching as Council systems went offline across the galaxy. The virus was working exactly as designed, disabling the aliens' technology without harming the biological crew members. "All Council military assets are neutralized," Park reported. "Their ships are powerless, their weapons are offline, and their communication networks are down. They're completely helpless." Captain Kim moved his ships into position around the disabled Council vessels. The aliens who had arrived at Earth with overwhelming force were now prisoners in their own ships, dependent on human mercy for their survival. General Yun Sang's voice came through the communication system from Earth's military headquarters. "All Council ground forces have surrendered. Their equipment stopped working simultaneously with their ships. We have taken their leadership into custody without resistance." Admiral Lee stood in the command center, looking at the tactical display that showed the complete collapse of the Council's military power. In less than a week, humanity had gone from facing extinction to becoming the dominant force in the galaxy. "Begin humanitarian operations," Lee ordered. "Provide life support to disabled Council ships. We're not genocidal monsters like they are." The irony was not lost on anyone in the command center. Humanity was showing more mercy to their defeated enemies than the Council had ever shown to their victims. Human ships moved to assist the disabled alien vessels, providing food, water, and medical aid to crews who had come to Earth planning to destroy human civilization. As news of the Council's defeat spread throughout the galaxy, liberated species began celebrating their freedom for the first time in generations. Worlds that had been enslaved for centuries were suddenly free to govern themselves again. But Admiral Lee knew that the war was only the beginning. Destroying the Council's military power was easy compared to the challenge of building something better to replace their empire. Humanity now faced the responsibility of bringing peace and justice to a galaxy that had known only oppression for 1,000 years. The cold grin that had started the war was gone, replaced by the serious expression of a leader who understood the weight of what came next. Humanity had proven they could be the galaxy's most effective predators. Now they had to prove they could be something more. 6 months after the Council's defeat, Admiral Lee Jun stood in the same command center where humanity's war had begun. But now, instead of looking at tactical displays showing enemy positions, he was watching the construction of something entirely new, the first Galactic Alliance assembly station. The massive structure was being built in Earth's orbit by crews from dozens of different species. Former Council slaves worked alongside human engineers, sharing technology and knowledge that had been suppressed for centuries. Where once there had been fear and oppression, there was now hope and cooperation. Dr. Park Hana entered the command center carrying reports from across the galaxy. Her role had evolved from intelligence analyst to diplomatic coordinator, helping newly freed species establish their own governments and join the growing alliance. The Keth have officially requested membership in the alliance, Park reported. That brings our total to 43 member species, with 12 more expressing serious interest. Lee nodded with satisfaction. The transformation of the galaxy was happening faster than anyone had expected. Species that had been enemies under Council rule were learning to work together, united by their shared desire for freedom and self-determination. Captain Kim Tae's voice came through the communication system from his position near the former Council homeworld. Admiral, we've completed the evacuation of the Council leadership. They're being transported to the designated preservation world as planned. The irony was intentional. The Council's former leaders were being relocated to a remote planet, where they could live peacefully under Alliance protection, exactly as they had planned to do with humanity. The difference was that the Alliance provided genuine protection and autonomy, not slavery disguised as safety. Engineer Choi Da-yoon had been working with scientists from across the galaxy to develop new technologies that benefited all species rather than just military applications. Her latest project was a communication network that would allow instant contact between any Alliance worlds, but without the centralized control that had made the Council's system vulnerable to attack. The new quantum communication grid is ready for testing, Choi announced. Unlike the Council's network, this one can't be shut down from a single point. Each world maintains its own node, so the system stays active even if individual nodes are damaged. Lee was proud of how humanity had handled their victory. Instead of becoming galactic conquerors themselves, humans had chosen to build something better. The alliance was based on voluntary membership, mutual respect, and shared defense against external threats. General Yoon Sang arrived from Earth's surface, where he had been overseeing the integration of former Council military technology with Alliance defense systems. Many alien technologies were being adapted for peaceful purposes, turning weapons of oppression into tools of exploration and development. The defense grid is operational, Yoon reported. Any species that threatens Alliance members will face the same fate as the Council. But unlike the Council, we won't go looking for new worlds to conquer. The Alliance military doctrine was simple: defend member worlds, protect the innocent, and maintain peace through strength. But that strength would never be used for conquest or subjugation. Humanity had learned from the Council's mistakes and was determined not to repeat them. Dr. Park activated a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Green markers indicated Alliance member worlds, yellow showed species in negotiation for membership, and blue marked independent worlds that maintained friendly relations. There were no red markers anymore. The last hostile forces had been neutralized months ago. The transformation is remarkable, Park observed. In less than a year, we've gone from a galaxy ruled by fear to one based on cooperation and mutual support. But Lee knew that their success had created new responsibilities. As news of the Alliance spread beyond the galaxy's borders, they had begun receiving communications from other star systems facing their own oppressors. The Alliance was becoming a beacon of hope for oppressed species throughout the universe. We've received another request for assistance, Park continued, accessing a new communication from a distant galaxy cluster. A species called the Vel are being enslaved by something called the hegemony. They're asking for help. Lee considered the request carefully. The Alliance had the power to help, but intervention in other galaxies was a significant step. It would mean expanding their mission beyond just maintaining peace in their own territory. What do we know about this hegemony? Lee asked. Similar to the Council in many ways, Park replied. They conquer species through overwhelming force, then exploit them for resources and labor. The Vel have been fighting a resistance war for decades, but they're losing. Captain Kim's image appeared on the communication screen as he joined the discussion from his ship. If we help the Vel, we'll be setting a precedent. Every oppressed species in the universe will look to us for liberation. Is that necessarily a bad thing? Asked Engineer Choi. We have the technology and the military power to help. Don't we have a responsibility to use it for good? The question sparked a debate that had been building within Alliance leadership for months. How far should their mission extend? Were they just defenders of their own galaxy? Or did they have a broader responsibility to fight oppression wherever they found it? Admiral Lee made the decision that would define humanity's role in the universe for generations to come. We help them, but not as conquerors or liberators imposing our will. We support their resistance, provide them with tools and training, and let them win their own freedom. The approach was quintessentially human. Give people the means to help themselves, rather than doing everything for them. It was the opposite of the Council's paternalistic control, and it reflected humanity's belief in the value of self-determination. Over the following months, Alliance advisors and equipment began arriving in the Vel Galaxy. But instead of Alliance ships fighting the hegemony directly, human trainers taught Vel fighters how to use advanced weapons and tactics. Alliance engineers helped them build their own ships and weapons. Alliance scientists shared technology that the Vel could adapt to their own needs. The result was a Vel resistance that grew stronger and more effective with each passing week. The hegemony, like the Council before them, found themselves facing an enemy that was no longer primitive or helpless. Their standard tactics failed against opponents who had been trained by the species that had defeated the galaxy's most powerful empire. Dr. Park monitored the progress from her position in the Alliance Command Center. The Vel resistance has liberated their first star system. The hegemony is retreating to more defensive positions. Good, Lee replied. Let them know we're proud of their success, but remind them that this is their victory, not ours. As news of the Vel success spread, more requests for assistance began arriving from oppressed species across the universe. The Alliance response was always the same: provide support and training, but let each species win their own freedom in their own way. Years passed, and the Alliance grew into something unprecedented in galactic history. A voluntary association of free species dedicated to mutual defense and shared prosperity. Trade flourished between member worlds, scientific knowledge was shared freely, and cultural exchange enriched every participating civilization. Admiral Lee, now older and bearing the title of Alliance Supreme Commander, stood once again in the command center that had become the heart of galactic governance. A new communication was coming in from a previously unknown species, and Lee wondered if it would be another request for help, or perhaps another threat to deal with. The message was neither. It was a greeting from an ancient species that had been watching the galaxy's transformation with great interest. They identified themselves as the Guardians, and they had a surprising revelation to share. We have observed your species for many cycles, the Guardian ambassador said through the communication link. Humanity's approach to power is unique in our experience. Most species become corrupted by strength, but you have used yours to create freedom rather than dominion. Lee listened with interest as the Guardian continued. We wish to offer humanity and the Alliance something that we have never offered before. Membership in the Universal Council of Guardians, an organization of species dedicated to protecting developing civilizations from conquest and oppression. The offer was remarkable. Recognition from beings so advanced that they had been protecting younger species for millions of years. But it also came with new responsibilities and challenges that would test everything humanity had learned about leadership and power. Dr. Park looked at Admiral Lee with a mixture of excitement and concern. What do you think? Lee considered the offer carefully, remembering the cold grin he had worn when humanity first defied the Galactic Council. That grin had been born of anger and determination to protect Earth from destruction. Now faced with an opportunity to protect countless other worlds from the same fate, he felt a different kind of resolve. We accept, Lee said, but with the same conditions we've always maintained. We support others in gaining their freedom, but we never impose our will upon them. The Guardian's response was what humans might have interpreted as approval. That is exactly why we chose you.